Hello everyone, GL2 here. Thank you for joining me this morning on my yacht, the Sea Anomaly. And today I will be discussing with you articulation in the female wrestling action figure. We will be covering 3 different companies: Jazwares, Jakks Pacific, and Mattel. So there's a lot to unpack here, and I will do my best to keep it organized because, of course, being that I have the most toys, there's a lot of action figures to go through and a lot of different nuances to discuss. And this is by no means anywhere close to my entire female wrestling action figure collection, but I think it's an excellent representation of what is here. So, I'm going to begin with the earliest figures that I have go back to the 2003, 1998 era action figure created by Jakks Pacific. Now, the figures that come from that era do not have the articulation of what you will find today. So here's such a figure. Now, this is Stacy Keibler, who you may know as someone who dated George Clooney, someone who's also been on my yacht. Oh, it's very sticky. Now, this is a Jakks Pacific 2004 figure of Stacy Keibler, and as you'll notice, she's almost a statue. She has no knee articulation, but she can move her legs just in one angle. This one just kind of rotates, and this one sort of kicks. And then the arms have more articulation, the shoulder joint and the elbow. There's no, there is wrist articulation, as well as on this side. Okay, but you'll notice her torso is bent at a particular angle, and it stays that way. All right. Now, what's exciting is that I have a new Stacy Keibler action figure, which you can purchase now. And that figure comes in this package. This is a Mattel version, the other Jakks Pacific. You'll see that, Mattel. And that figure here, she comes dressed in her business outfit and her clipboard because she was scouting for new wrestlers. She would go out there and she would be scouting, and if you wanted to change her hairstyle, she came with an alternate head that you could change, and she even came with alternate hands, which were in the package. Oh, these things are so specific, so sticky. All right, so that is your Stacy Keibler figure. Now, another Jakks Pacific figure from that era is Jacqueline Moore. Now, Jacqueline Moore was also a wrestler then. Now, Stacy Keibler was more of a personality rather than a wrestler and a manager. But Jacqueline was actually a wrestler. And again, you have no knees. You have a particular angle and twist to her hips. You have no shoulder articulation, just other than going back and forth. No elbows. But what you do have is you have a signature of Jacqueline. Okay, and so that is Jacqueline Moore. And then there's a Tori Wilson figure. Now, I would like to get a fully articulated modern Tori Wilson figure at some point. But here we go again, the earlier versions. Now, this one does have knee articulation and a little bit of hip articulation, more of a rotation forward and backward. You also have your shoulders and your elbows and even wrists. Perhaps because Tori Wilson actually was a wrestler, but then again so was Jacqueline, and they gave her less articulation, but you did get the signature. And then we have Lita. Now, this is a 1998 Lita Jakks Pacific action figure. You have knees. Again, you have the hip articulation, which is limited. You have the body twist, which does not change. You have shoulders, elbows, wrists, and you have a very, very good likeness to her face, right? And later, a couple of years ago, WWE came out with a updated Lita figure, right? And this came with as a 2-pack with her rival and friend Trish Stratus. Now, this has the full hip articulation, and you have some ankle articulation, sideways, back and forth, and sometimes you can get the ankles to bend, but not on this, because this is what's called a basic figure, and the basic figure of this line did not have an ankle that would go up and down, but would go back and forth. And also you did not have a joint in the middle of the thigh. So you just had the articulation in the hips on the new basic WWE wrestling figures. Now, you have waist articulation, but you do not have upper torso articulation. Again, a basic figure, and this is something that is the basic figure articulation lineup or standard now, but earlier it was different, and we will go through that. Now, you do have elbows, but you do not have the double jointed elbows or the double jointed knees. You have the wrists, and you do have the shoulders going in all directions, and the likeness of Lita in her visage, her face. All right. Now, this is the interesting point I'd like to make. So, the Lita figure was a basic figure, all right, a more modern basic figure. But if you'll go back a few years, the basic figures had more articulation. And as an example here, I have 3. I have Alicia Fox, all right, very popular wrestler at her time. And Alicia Fox was a basic figure, which meant it cost about $10 to $12. And you did have ankle articulation, and you could swivel her leg. You did not have double jointed knees, but you did have a knee joint and a hip joint, and you even had rotational axis in her upper thigh. And you not only did you have waist twist, but you had upper torso movement as well. You had the joint in the bicep here, you see? So you have shoulder articulation, but also upper bicep articulation. You did not have the double jointed elbows. You did have a wrist that turned. And so that was your basic figure. Now, there was not very much difference between a basic figure at that time and an elite figure. So you would pay about $10 for this, and you would pay $20 for an elite figure. And the elite figure would tend to come with more accessories, but not more articulation. An example of that here. So I'm going to show you. This is Paige. Now, I assume that this will eventually be worth a significant amount of money. This is the Elite Paige action figure with the 2 belts, the Diva belt, and the NXT Championship belt. All right. So now, if this is the Elite figure, all right, and it does. I cannot tell exactly the joints in the knees, but it does have more articulation in the torso, but it has the same articulation as you would get in a basic figure, but as accessories you would get those belts and you would get a nicer package. See, a basic package would look something like this, right? And I'll be going through that in a moment. But now here is a Paige basic figure, all right? And the basic figure, you have these knee pads, just like you have in this figure. You have the knee pads, So I assume that there are no double joints there. The rubber of the knee pad would not allow you to articulate and get any benefit if you did have a double jointed knee. But you had the foot and the swivel, and you had the joint in the bicep, and so you see you even have the torso joint, and this is a basic figure. So at some point WWE wised up and said, well, if we're putting everything in the basic figure that we would in the elite figure, that doesn't seem quite fair. And in fact, here's an AJ Lee figure, also very popular. She was a very popular wrestler, and she has a lot of upper torso swivel. Some figures just have more than others, and she had the bicep swivel and all the other swivels. And again, this is a basic figure. But as I had said, at some point they changed the basic figures, and they gave them less articulation. Now, looking for here we are. Looking for Trish Stratus. Now, Trish Stratus I have spanning two different brands. So there's a WWE Trish Stratus basic brand. All right. Now, you do not have the upper torso joint. You do have a swivel, but that's all you get. You do not have the bicep joint. Basic figure now, around $10. And you do not have the upper thigh swivel. You do not have the ankle bend, but you do have a swivel. You see, and you do not have double jointed knees. Certainly you do not here. All right? And we can compare that with the early Trish Stratus figures of the early 2000s. Now this is a Jakks Pacific Trish Stratus figure, and you get the swivel. You do not get the upper torso swivel, and I don't believe anyone was doing that at that time. You do get head articulation in different angles, and you got that too on the basic figures now. There was a time when heads only went like this or didn't move at all. They didn't have full movement. They didn't have a ball joint that allowed you to move them all in all directions. You see now she does have, this is Jakks Pacific, she does have the upper bicep joint, full shoulder joint, wrist movement. She does not have the hips that go in all different directions. They just go forward and backwards. No double jointed knees back then. And in fact, you could even see the knee joint. There was no pads on them. But you did have ankle articulation. You did not have ankle swivel. You see, but these are things, that things change over time. However, not always in an expected way. Something I had noticed is that when they are elite figures of older action figures, they still often do not come with full articulation. An example here. Here's another Trish Stratus figure. Now, this is an elite figure. This is purchased within the past few years, so it's among the top of their technology. You do have upper torso swivel. You do have mid-thigh swivel, but you do not have double knees in the swivel, but you do have the upper bicep. But you do, like I said, you do not get the double knees. Now, she was popular in the 1990s especially, and you do not get the double knee joint. The Lita elite figure, who was also popular in the 1990s, has all the joints except, once again, you do not get the double knees. I can exemplify this further with the Wendy Richter figure. Now, here's a Wendy Richter figure. She was popular in the 80s. Actually, she began her career in '79 and retired, I believe, it was 2006. Quite a long career, especially for a lady. Most of them don't wrestle that long. But you do not have the double knees. Now, you have all the other articulations. You have the upper bicep, you have the mid-torso, and you have the swivel in the torso, and you have the swivel in the leg, but you do not have the double knees. And Medusa, who also went by Alundra Blaze, also a 1990s wrestler. Again, you have the upper torso and the swivel, but you do not get the double knees. Why do wrestling figures who were popular in the 90s not getting double knees. It's a mystery. And once again, we can see that things are not always the same, because China, who was popular in the 1990s, has the double knee joint. She has all the articulation of the most advanced figures. You see, double bicep and upper torso, and she is the most muscular female action figure, even more muscular than the She-Hulk figures that I have, which eventually we will see. And what is nice about WWE figures is you can alter them. And I'm going to show you just that. So I took the China figure, I bought an extra, it was on clearance, and I heated up the head of Sonya Deville, and the rubber got soft. I removed the China head and I put it on here, and now I have a warrior. These weapons go to a couple of other figures. This one I do not remember. I think it's actually, no I do. It goes to a McFarlane Batman figure. He has 2 axes. This shield and this helmet go to a WWE series where the figures came with all kinds of ancient weapons and wings and crazy kinds of contraptions that they could have on their arms, and one day we will go through that. But you see, I put the helmet on with those clear rubber bands, and it is Sonya Deville, who I think looks like a gladiator, so I made a gladiator figure out of her, who has tons of articulation. And we're not done, because I want to show you more about how you can change WWE figures here a bit. Now, this is Lana, you see, and she came in white with a skirt and a head that had a crown on it. Well, I was not a fan of that look, so I painted the shoes black instead of, they were pink, yes, they were pink, and I painted her outfit red, and it had little dots on it, and I painted those gold, and I changed the head to a different Lana head, and I like this figure much better. Now, this was a basic figure, so you do not have the double knees, but you do have the swivel in the upper thigh and the bicep, because, once again, the basic figures, the earlier basic figures had all of the articulation of the elite figures, except for the double knees. But then again, if it's a 1990s wrestler, you never know whether you're going to get double knees or not. So far, only on China. Now, the top of the technology on WWE elite figures, I think, is exemplified by this Bianca Belair. Now, Bianca Belair, of course, she has all the articulation I told you about, the hip swivel, the knees, the double knees, the ankles, but she has the greatest amount of swivel in her upper torso, and I think that's just wonderful because she can really bend and really articulate, and if she were leaping off of a rope, you can really get the feel of her flying through the air with the greatest of ease. And she comes with the WWE Championship belt because she is the champion. All right. Now, let's see here. We have some other examples of, I wanted to go over, yes, the, a little bit more examples. Again, this is Charlotte Flair, first time in the line, so several years ago, and more than 5 years ago. And again, you do get all the articulation, bicep, upper torso, swivel, upper thigh swivel, but not the ankles. And again, first time in the line, Mandy Rose. So that's your first time in the line, Mandy Rose. Compared to the new Mandy Rose, I just thought you might like to see that. And you can see her look has changed. And now she has a tattoo on her shoulder. And this is a basic figure. And it has, they actually both have the same amount of articulation. Even though this one came out, they're close contemporaries as far as the action figures are like 2 years apart, but this one did not get as much articulation as some of the basic figures, and this got what you get now is a basic figure, without all the swivels and bells and whistles. All right, so that almost finishes WWE. Ronda Rousey is very popular. She was a UFC fighter, and she came with a rowdy Ronda Rousey figure like this, and I was not satisfied with that, so I took another body to another wrestler and I painted it. It was just a bikini, and I painted the bikini black and down the center, and I painted her hands black, her gloves. I gave her fighting gloves, painted everything here black, and I changed that head to a Ronda Rousey figure. Interestingly, when I finished this figure, after painting it and switching the head and everything, within 2 weeks, they came out with a Ronda Rousey figure dressed very similarly in black, and so I could have saved my effort, but then again, I hire these artisans to do my bidding, and so it was done. And it is custom, and there is no other like it. Right? And for those of you that are Natalia fans, here's a Natalia figure, and you get waist swivel, but no upper torso swivel, no upper arm swivel, and no double knees. So again, this is a basic figure, but I just thought if those of you fans of Natalia, there you are. Now, Jazwares. Jazwares makes figures currently for UFC. Now, here is an Amanda Nunes UFC fighting figure. All right? Now, she's got excellent articulation. You have a lot of hip articulation and even some ratcheting so she can hold her position. The hips ratchet, the knees ratchet, and they are double jointed knees. The ankle has slight ratcheting, and even the foot, it articulates in the foot so it swivels like a real foot. You have upper torso articulation, and of course you have swivel in the upper torso, and you have your upper arm, but you do not, yes you do. You get the upper arm joint. It's a little bit hard to see with the glare of the sun. I must keep my sunglasses on, sometimes I cannot see the figure exactly. And she has her fighting gloves just like I put on my Ronda Rousey figure, and her head, has some articulation. Not as much as some other figures as far as looking up and down, but still have a lot of excellent articulation in that figure. That is Jazwares. Jazwares also makes the action figures for AEW. And here is one example of an AEW figure. I have others, but this is most new and probably hard to get right now. This is Chris Statlander. And Chris Statlander has, lo and behold, the double jointed knee. And you have the foot articulation in all directions. Jazwares even customizes the size of the bodies to match the wrestlers. You have your upper arm swivel. Because of her hair, you don't get quite as much head articulation, but as much as you might need. She did not come with an extra set of hands. She's just got fists, and she's ready for fisticuffs at any time. Queensberry rules, of course. And let's see, here we have good old Jakks Pacific. Jakks Pacific made action figures for Total Non-Stop Wrestling. Now, as we had mentioned earlier, Jakks Pacific made the older WWE figures, but there was a falling out between Jakks Pacific and WWE. WWE wanted to do some different things with the figures, and Jakks Pacific, it was about ownership of the figures, actually, the molds, and they parted ways. But during that, and when they parted ways, Jakks Pacific went to TNA, Total Non-Stop Action Wrestling, and here we are, Gail Kim action figure. from that era. This would be the early 2000s. And what you have here is you do not have double knees, but you do have some ankle joint articulation. You have a lot of hip swivel. They have rounded hips, you see. Now this is a joint that you do not see in the other wrestlers. This is, you see how it's rounded here, and it gives you much more angle to your swivel. And you have a very noticeable joint in the middle of the torso, but though if you can get past that visually, it offers an excellent amount of articulation, and you have swivel in the waist. You have upper arm articulation and elbow, not double elbows, but you have shoulder articulation and head articulation. And that is where Jakks Pacific found itself later with their female action figures. And there's not a lot of variation with the Jakks Pacific female action figures. As far as their bodies, not as much as you would find today. Also, you may be curious to see, excuse me, this is a Melina figure. This is an exclusive figure, WWE figure. These are boxed in a special box. There's a little bit more money, and it has like a denim skirt on her with a metal belt. And this figure has basically the kind of articulation that you would find in the Gail Kim figure, except without the mid-torso figure. I suppose they didn't want to mess up the lines on that. But this is, again, a fancy Jakks Pacific WWE figure before they stopped that. Now, last and not least is an elite figure from the 1990s that has full articulation. So this is Miss Elizabeth. Those of you that may remember Miss Elizabeth from the 1980s and into the 90s. And this one has the double knee joints. It has, let's see here, it does not have the double elbow joints, but it has the upper arm, bicep joint, the shoulder, and this is going to remain in the package, and you have a real cloth outfit for her. So, is it worth a lot of money? No, not yet, but you know, with those things, you never know what's going to happen. So, all right, everyone, I hope you enjoyed that. I will be back, with another extravagant example of my collection. This is GL2 saying, bon voyage.